Welcome back to the MizzouToday Show, brought to you by On3 and Rivals. Tuesday edition of the show. We've only ever done Wednesdays, except for 1 week. We did do a Thursday, and I believe that was because of National Signing Day was on a Wednesday. And that's another reason why we're doing it on a Tuesday here, February 3rd. There's a smaller signing day for Missouri. I mean, bigger than years past. They're going to have a couple guys signing in-state recruits on Wednesday. So I'll be off doing that, kind of going to talk to some players. So we thought it would be best to talk about the Missouri men's basketball team now, put the transfer portal in the rearview mirror, and we're going to look at the Missouri men's basketball team at the bye week, Kyle. The Tigers are 15-7 right now overall. They're seventh in the SEC at 5-4, just got back over that 500 mark following a win against Mississippi State this past weekend. Going into the show, we were talking about the expectations from the national perspective. Going into the year, Kyle, there were a lot of national writers, national analysts pretty high on this Missouri team making the tournament. I thought of it more of a bubble team. You thought of it more as a bubble team. I think a lot of even more of the fan base thought this Missouri team was a little bit more on the fence than years past. You didn't replace Caleb Grill. You didn't replace Tamar Bates. You're expecting guys like Anthony Robinson to step up even more than he did last year. Mark Mitchell to be the centerpiece again of that offensive side of the ball. But with where this team is, and I think it's a lot of peaks and valleys, and your expectations change with every week in college basketball, and the feeling changes every week. What's kind of been your big picture feel for this Missouri team? And have the Tigers bested any expectations for you? Do you feel like they're right around where you thought they would be?
I'll say I think I was pretty consistent at the beginning of the season, leading into the season, saying that this year was going to be a bit of a step back because, like you mentioned, Tamar Bates and Caleb Grill's a lot to lose. The Tigers were really relying on a couple of big steps up for development pieces. And, if you talk about expectations, like A. Robinson's one that we'll talk about more later, but him not playing to the level that people expected coming into the year is a big reason why maybe it feels like they've taken a little bit more of a step back than maybe people thought coming into the year, especially like you mentioned, the national analysts probably thought coming into the year. But, I wrote about kind of what is possible the rest of the way. And if Mizzou wins Saturday at South Carolina, which is a road game that they have to be able to take, right? That's part of the rest of the schedule is they're going to have to win at least one or two road games if they want to make the tournament. That has to be one of them at this point. If they're able to win that, they're 6-4 in conference, which is exactly the same record through 10 games as last year. And it's a game better than the 5-5 that Mizzou was in Dennis Gates' first year through the first 10 games of SEC play. The back half of the schedule is difficult. There's a lot of top tier teams left to play. But 6-4 in a generally weaker SEC much weaker compared to last year, generally kind of down a little bit overall, is not a bad place to be. Like, I think we were thinking about them as a bubble team coming in, and they're kind of right on the cusp of being a bubble team right now. So it hasn't felt great the whole time, obviously. But it seems kind of like at this point, they're right on where I thought they'd be overall.
And I was looking at it. I don't think this guy gets enough flowers for what he's kind of been doing. I think he's emerging more in the On3 workspace right now. And Kyle, that's James Fletcher. I don't know if you know James, but I do share his bracketology every once in a while once Missouri is listed. And last time he had Missouri kind of in that mark was the win over Oklahoma. You win in overtime on the buzzer beater. I mean, that conversation, I think we talked about it on the show. It's like that conversation about that game would be a lot different if Mark Mitchell does not make that shot. If Pierce doesn't make that shot, Trent Pierce, to send that game to overtime. So that game kind of put Missouri back in the picture a little bit. You had losses back-to-back to LSU and Georgia, LSU on the road, and then Georgia at home only by 2 points. It was number 21, Georgia. And then you go into the Oklahoma game, you win. It's one of those scenarios where, God, I hate this team. I think that was like probably the what was resonating through the fan base. But man, they can get things done sometimes, and that's what kind of put Missouri back into that mark of being on that kind of bubble team. But since then, James hasn't mentioned Missouri among his teams in bracketology.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start focusing in a little bit more because, yeah, like you mentioned, you're either play out of two plays not ending perfectly for Mizzou away from a loss to Oklahoma, and then you're looking at an extra minute of stumbling in the most recent game against Mississippi State, and maybe that's a loss, at the end with how Mizzou was playing down the stretch after the Honor Boateng injury. If they don't get it together, if it takes one extra minute to get it together, maybe that ends up in a loss. If one of two incredible shots doesn't fall against Oklahoma, that ends up a loss. And then you're looking at a team that's 2-6 or something, 3-6 in SEC play, and then we're in a real bad spot. So, that can happen in basketball where it's kind of like, yeah, you are 4 total plays going a different direction away from being in a pretty bad spot. And really, I don't, they're a better free throw shooting day away from beating Ole Miss on the road. They're, a last second shot over a 7-footer going down away from beating Georgia. Like, it can go either way, but it is very close when you're looking at it being like, they're kind of on the bubble versus way out of it.
9 games left on the schedule, Kyle. 5 Saturday games, 2 Wednesday games, and then 2 Tuesday games all sandwiched into there. You're going on the road, as you mentioned earlier, South Carolina this weekend. That's a noon tip, Central Standard Time on SEC Network. You're going to go back on the road on Wednesday at Texas A&M. You have Texas at home, Vanderbilt at home, Arkansas on the road, Tennessee at home, Mississippi State and Oklahoma back-to-back on the road. And then you finish up the regular season against Arkansas at home on March 7th. That 9-game stretch, kind of tough when you have to go Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Tennessee, when you go home, away, home. But I think there's still winnable games. Like you mentioned, South Carolina on the road, Mississippi State. I don't know about that Oklahoma game after seeing those 2 teams play at home for Missouri. But where's your mind at right now for the rest of the season? Because, Texas A&M could be a hard one. Texas has won games against ranked teams this year. They beat Georgia at home. Where's your mind going down those 9 games, and what's the best finish that Missouri needs? And you can't say 9-0.
Okay, well, it's 8-1. I realistically think a lot depends on Saturday's game, and Mizzou has really, really struggled away from home this year. The performance at Kentucky is the one good performance outside of Mizzou Arena this season. Because you look at the rest of them, even the season opener at Howard, it was about a 20-point win, but it was still, there was a lot in there that had fans a bit worried early on against a lower level team. Obviously, neither of the rivalry games went well. Those weren't even true road games. They're just away from Mizzou Arena. The performance at Kentucky, very good. Ole Miss, self-inflicted wounds, kills you in that game. It seems like LSU over and over again, it's just playing away from home has been really, really hard for this team. And it's going to have to be better the rest of the way because, one, there's only 4 home games left. So, and you probably need 5 wins to get to the tournament. So you're going to have to take at least 1 road game. And a lot of those home games are really tough. Arkansas is really good. Texas A&M's very good. Tennessee's very good. You're going to probably have to take at least South Carolina and 1 of Oklahoma and Mississippi State on the road. That's 2 road wins when you have 1 all season right now. 2, but 1 power conference road win. And you might just have to take all 3 of them if you're Mizzou, because I think especially if they lose Saturday, then you're going into a stretch that is really, really tough. And you might be looking at like 2.5 or 3 straight weeks of losing. Straight up, I think you might be looking at a 2 to 3 week losing streak if they lose Saturday, and it kind of kills the vibe a little bit.
We kept talking about the start of SEC play being a tougher stretch for Missouri. You mentioned you go on the road, you play well against Kentucky. It's not been the same Kentucky team the rest of the season. It's been a very up and down year just entirely for the SEC. It's not the best the strongest conference right now for basketball. But you beat Florida at home and you start SEC play 2-0. And I think a lot of people remember that. That was a pretty exciting time. But what happens in the world where you beat Ole Miss on the road, you beat LSU on the road, you start 5-0 in SEC play, and then you kind of start petering around with these losses to Georgia at home, you get blown out against Alabama. I mean, it's a totally different picture. There's a lot of winnable games in there. And I think that's where it's going to come back to bite Missouri a little bit with some of those road contests, especially early on, because they were the little bit of the easier ones. Because now you have to go on the road and face Texas A&M. You have to face Arkansas. You have to face Oklahoma, who's a tough test at home now. Now you have to go into their building.
Yeah, LSU and Ole Miss are what's going to really hurt if the team ends up just off the bubble. Like, if I know they've been kind of first 4 out in a few projections recently, if that's where they end up, yeah, losing at Ole Miss when you shot 50% from the line, that's going to be one you look back on. Losing at LSU, and I think LSU still only has one SEC win at this point. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's the case.
Two.
Okay. But
South
Carolina. Okay. So one of those is Mizzou. And yeah, I mean, those were 2 games that you probably needed to win. And if Mizzou ends up just off the bubble, they're going to be the 2 that you look back on and say, like, yeah, that's what kept the team out of the tournament. And now, yeah, you're looking at needing to go 5-4 again, at least, against a much tougher sequence of schedule than those first 9 games.
We're going to do a quick read from our sponsors of our Roback. The other side, I'm going to ask Kyle a little bit more of player-specific questions. He wrote about Anthony Robinson this past week, and we'll get some more thoughts from him, just where the trajectory is going for the Mizzou guard. Roback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Roback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Roback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Roback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection. It's our favorite. We wear it to all the Mizzou football games. I haven't been to a basketball game this year with Kyle, but I'm going to believe that he wears it to those games too. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of active wear. Roback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code MIZ20 on Roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code MIZ20. Kyle, before we get into some talk about this Missouri men's basketball team, I always think about that when I do the Roback read, and it talks about football stars past and present. I've seen it. Club Nick is on there from Clemson, Jameis Winston. If you're talking about someone from the past, give me one Mizzou guy that should get a Roback sponsorship, past and then present. I have my picks.
I mean, I got Drew Lock on the mind because he's about to be on a Super Bowl Seahawks team. So there's your past guy for me.
Okay.
Present, I don't know. What do you think of Nick Rodriguez? I think that'd be fun.
That's a good one. That is a really good shout, Kyle. I did not even think about Nick Rodriguez.
I think he'd be a real interesting guy to have as a sponsored athlete.
He might have the character for it. I think he'd have fun with the commercial. I was going the same sense of the past quarterback, but I went Chase Daniel. I think that was just kind of more of a layup right now with how big he's in the social media sphere. He might already have it. I don't know. I don't know who's all on the list, but that just feels right on that sense. I'll go with Nick Rodriguez. I'll go with that one. That's a good one. All right. We're going to talk about some Missouri men's basketball players. Spares.
I think you've muted.
Oh man, my entire mic came out. What was the last thing you heard from me?
Let's talk about Mizzou basketball players.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about Mizzou basketball players now. Specifically, we'll start with the point guards, T.O. Barrett and Anthony Robinson. T.O. Barrett over the past couple games has taken over that starting role. We've seen it over the last couple of weeks where you've seen Anthony Robinson really take a step back in maybe the comfort on the floor. You've seen him a little bit more frustrated at times. They talked about on the broadcast. I know you didn't get to hear this, Kyle, but Trent Pierce took Anthony Robinson out and just took him out to dinner, just tried to separate him from basketball, get him back in the right headspace. They were in the same class. They're both juniors for Missouri. They're still trying to figure out everything to get him back to where he was last year. When you lose guys like Tamar Bates and Caleb Brill from last season, you put a little bit more on Anthony Robinson's plate. It seems like it just really hasn't been there, and you're losing that facilitator that was really good last season. You're still trying to find it. You talked about it, him almost losing his powers at the point guard position. What's been your kind of overall takeaway of those 2 point guards?
First, did they talk about the Trent Pierce thing on the broadcast? Because Trent talked about that in the post game.
Yeah, they talked about it on the broadcast during the Mississippi State game. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool and seemed to work out okay and played better Saturday than he had recently. T.O.'s been great. I mean, he's, exactly maybe not the perfect point guard to operate the Mizzou offense, but he's been exactly what they were lacking in Ant Robinson, which is confidence in what he's doing. Like T.O. is sure of himself and what he's trying to do on the floor in every movement. So that doesn't always work perfectly. It's led to a couple of turnovers each game, but it's better than, overthinking yourself and not having the confidence, which is kind of what we've seen from Ant. Coming into the year, there was big expectations for him. He was, returning all SEC defense team, only underclassmen on there. People, now being asked to take a step up offensively with Tamar Bates and Caleb Brill gone. And he showed last year some ability to shoot. He had definitely shown the ability to drive and get to the line and all that. And we just haven't seen that at the same level. I think just an image popped into my mind, which was, as you were talking, during introductions last year, Ant would get introduced and he'd run out onto the floor and do like some choppy little steps. Tamar would get introduced. He'd come out and do choppy little steps the other way. And then they'd go at each other and kind of do like a shooting motion as they jumped past each other, circle around, do it again. They did that every game. And I didn't notice it early on, but Ant is still doing that just by himself. And it's kind of, I don't know. That image, once I noticed it, was like, oh, that feels kind of similar or representative of the year to me, where like he was trying to keep doing something that just doesn't work as well without Caleb Brill. And like, obviously the last 4 games or whatever since Ant was removed from the lineup, he hasn't done that. But that was just something I remembered seeing where it's like, oh yeah, his style worked really well when he was the 4th offensive option. It doesn't work so well when he's the 2nd offensive option. And when he's trying to do that on his own, the same thing just looks a little worse.
Mm-hmm. And I think that comes down to the roster construction. I sound like a broken record already. You didn't replace Tamar Bates. You didn't replace Caleb Brill. The 3-pointing, just especially from Caleb Brill's sense. And you have seen Jacob Cruz step forward, and parts of this season has been one of the best 3-point shooters just in the SEC, not just even on the team. But from that sense of you lose that, and you're putting a little bit more on Anthony Robinson's plate. You're losing other parts of his game at the same time. It hasn't been the best kind of case for him this year. Still trying to break him out of his shell to see if you can get something back from him as you go down the rest of the SEC slate. We'll talk about 2 of the bigger guys on the floor, and Mark Mitchell and Sean Phillips Jr. Lumping those 2 together because I think in some stretches there have been some people frustrated with Sean Phillips, and I think my friend Peyton Haverman has pointed out. I forget what he calls it. It's like the scheduled like check if he committed a flagrant foul. Like it's the scheduled monitor check on Sean Phillips Jr. I think you've been a little bit more not supportive, but defending. His play hasn't been as bad as what other people have said. Well, what have you seen from the power forward in the center?
It's interesting to lump those two together because I think the main issue that comes up for both of them is they probably shouldn't be on the floor at the same time. Um, just offensively, Mark obviously has his very attacking style where he needs space in the lane to kind of beat down a defender and get to the rim. And when Sean is down there, it just closes certain areas off in a way that doesn't work very well. Um, I've I've had felt like I have to kind of defend Sean Phillips's play a little bit because people have been going at him hard. I mean, maybe it's just, some of the loudest Mizzou fans and they're the people that pop up a lot for me, but like, yeah, obviously the getting in fights is bad. I'm not trying to defend that or anything, but he's not terrible. He's not an awful 7-footer. He's probably the best. I mean, he's certainly the best offensive 7-footer Gates has had in his time here, and he's tried to collect them. Josh Gray was probably a bit better as a rebounder last year. Phillips has a little bit more of an offensive focus, and there have been times where like nothing on the offense is working, and then Phillips just makes a little post move, hits a layup, and stuff kind of starts working again. Like he's I think it's more an issue with the style of offense that Dennis wants to run, and the primary part of that offense being Mark Mitchell, where just like it looks clunky if Mark is not able to get to the hoop because Sean's just kind of taking up space in the post. And then that kind of, rolls into like, oh yeah, he's gotten beat on defense a couple of times. 7-footers sometimes do because they're generally kind of slow. And he's had some turnovers where the ball just like slips out of his hand. And that's bad. I'm not trying to tell you he's God's gift to the post, but he's not terrible. I just don't think that type of back to the basket 7-foot post guy works well in Gates' system, and he's kept trying to find them. And like Connor Vanover didn't work. Josh Gray became an effective situational guy last year because Gates took him out of the starting lineup, which I think could have been an option with Phillips too. But like Josh Gray thrived by being able to come in at specific moments and not be part of the primary plan all the time. Peyton Marshall looked like he was going to be all right at times. And then Trent Burns is kind of a different thing. But like, I just don't think Dennis's system works that well with a back to the basket 7-foot post guy. It just doesn't flow well on offense, but that doesn't mean Sean Phillips is terrible.
We'll move on to two guys that have been more of the offense as of late, and maybe one of them not really shooting or scoring at the same rate that maybe some were previously kind of seeing at the start of SEC play, but two guys that came right, back when the SEC play started, in Trent Pierce and Jaden Stone. Pierce got his first start of the weekend. I mean, what's been your overall takeaway, and what did you get from the numbers this past week?
I'll start with Pierce. Obviously, with both of them, came back and were instantly pretty good. Like that, they are a big part of the reason why Mizzou beat Florida and beat Kentucky, right? Because those two made a huge difference in how the team operates. And even when they're not playing super well, the team still operates differently with them than it did in December without them. Trent, obviously, fantastic game in his first start. I think putting him in the starting lineup was something that a lot of Mizzou fans had been waiting on. And replacing Jacob Cruz was the more sensible option there. I was kind of talking about maybe he goes in for Sean Phillips like he did for Josh Gray last year, and you just go super floor space starting 5. But Trent had a few games in there kind of right before the start where he wasn't playing great. Oklahoma, obviously he saved the game with that buzzer beater at the end of regulation. I think that was his only made shot that game. There were a couple of games where he was hitting like 1 of 4, 1 of 5, like not really playing great. And then he played fantastic Saturday. I think he's going to be totally fine. And he's clearly taken a step up at the very least, confidence-wise and I think abilities-wise from last year, and certainly since his freshman year, he's been a big development piece. Jaden Stone was shooting the lights out when he came back. I think he was like 50-40 overall and from three in those first like 4 games of SEC play. Since then, I think he was at like 40-30-ish, which kind of surprised me, but it's been a little bit of a feeling while watching the games where it's like, even when he's open, I'm not nearly as confident that his shot's going to go in now as I was against Kentucky, right? Like those first few games where he came back, it was like, oh, Jaden Stone's got an inch of space, he's going to hit it. And now it kind of feels like maybe not. I think that was kind of one of the areas in between the columns this week where I was looking at like realistic improvements that could be made. I think Ant Robinson kind of taking a step again back toward maybe not reaching the expectations that were super high for him coming into the year, but just getting back to kind of what he was doing even close to last year production wise. And then Jaden Stone kind of getting maybe splitting the difference in where he was at the beginning of SEC play to where he is now, maybe adding, somewhere between 5 and 10% shooting overall and from three, which is actually kind of just in the middle for him and gets him closer to career averages. And I think that makes a big difference for Mizzou's offense going forward.
We talk about these rotations being pretty big, Kyle, and they've been smaller this year, and in part to maybe the roster decisions. And you look like, I think it's no secret, Aaron Rowe is probably going to redshirt this year. I don't see a world where he's going to play. Trent Burns came back from injury. He's played sparingly throughout that time. So now you're down 2 guys to injury in our Boateng and Javon Porter. So you already had 1 roster spot open. You were at 14 coming into the year, 14 of 15 seats filled. You subtract 3, now you're down to 11. I don't think it'll really affect Missouri too much, but what's your kind of outlook on both of those injuries for the Tigers?
Yeah, so Porter, we looked right before the show, hasn't played since early December. I don't expect him back. We don't have any like specific new information. Gates is not super forthcoming about injury stuff a lot of the time. When he talks about it, he says he expects Javon to be back this year. It doesn't really feel like that's going to happen to me. Maybe I'll be wrong. If he does return, I don't see him playing a monumental role at this point. He's missed 2 months. So even if he were to return Saturday, there would need to be a ramp up period to get him back to whatever role Dennis wants him to be in as a full-time player. I just don't see there being enough time for that to really happen at this point. And Honor, I don't have an official diagnosis to share. On the broadcast and from stills from the broadcast, it looked like a pretty badly dislocated knee. That's just kind of a guess. But a dislocated knee, if that is the case, tends to come with tendon issues. So, Gates said after the game, like 9 times out of 10, he's done for the rest of the year. There wasn't a lot of instant information, I think, even for Dennis at that point. But I wouldn't expect him to be back, which is too bad because those couple of plays right before the injury, he finally started to show that explosiveness that I think fans have been waiting on. Whether that would have continued, impossible to say. But like that windmill dunk he threw down the first time on the putback was insane. Incredible athleticism, incredible, just bounce and everything. And then he had a block on the other end and then was about to load up for another massive dunk. It's just unfortunate that it's like, oh, right then when like maybe you could see him kind of jump starting and becoming a little bit more of that guy that people have been waiting to see for a while. And now that's taken away probably for the rest of the year. And if it's tendon issues, maybe for a significant portion of next year.
We'll wrap it up with a quick question, Kyle, that I meant to ask you earlier about Mark Mitchell. You're kind of plugged in with the NBA. I feel like people don't know that. You have some close people in your life that are.
I've got some friends.
Yeah, you got some friends around the NBA. Is Mark Mitchell, a draft pick? That's a question I've kind of had with a couple of people. What have you heard there just with Mark Mitchell?
The general idea I'm hearing is that he'll get a G League opportunity or a summer league invite. I think his lack of a jumper is kind of the key factor here. Because like you could look at, Kobe Brown was the most recent Mizzou draft pick, and a big part of what took him from I wasn't as plugged in his junior season the year before Gates took over, but I don't think he was really being considered by NBA teams. What took him into that draft pick consideration was the ability to shoot that we saw really jump out of nowhere when Gates took over, right? That 3-point shot, more of a mix in for mid-range stuff. Like he showed that ability, and that's a big thing for NBA teams. Mark just doesn't really have that. I will say he's shooting 100% from three when Mizzou absolutely needs a three. It's wild how good he is in clutch moments from three. It's not a good jumper. It just isn't. It's one of the uglier shots that I've seen regularly. And he's not big enough to play without a jumper. So whether he gets drafted, some team takes a flyer in the second round, maybe. I think you're kind of realistically looking at like he'll get a chance in the summer league, see what he's able to do against NBA competition, and then maybe have to spend some time in the G League trying to develop a shot, which, is also where Tamar Bates is and Caleb Grill and Sean East. And it's Demoy Hodge. I don't think he's still in the
still is.
Is he?
Wow. Yeah, I've got this fun story. I've got some friends going to Dallas for the Super Bowl, and they were looking at the G League team there, and they found out he's on the G League team in Frisco. Yeah, Frisco, Texas.
They're going to Dallas for the Super Bowl?
That guy got a buddy who lives there, and a bunch of them are just
okay. So they're just going to visit friends for the Super Bowl.
Visit friends.
It's in San Francisco.
Watch it on the TV while the game's in San Francisco. Yes.
Okay. No, I mean, cool. Good for him. I couldn't remember if Demoy had kind of spent his time in the G League and gone to play elsewhere yet. So, I mean, that's kind of where all these recent Dennis Gates products are at the moment. Kobe Brown kind of fluctuates because that shot has seemed to go away a little bit with the Clippers. But that's kind of my read on it recently is like maybe he's worth a second round flyer by some team. Realistically, back end of the second round, maybe a UDFA like Tamar was last year with an invite to Summer League to kind of see what he's able to do against that level of competition.
Well, Kyle, that's all I got questions wise for Missouri men's basketball here at the bye week, idle week. I think someone pointed out to you once that they didn't want you to call it a bye week. They wanted you to call it an idle week. Did you email about that?
I remember that. I don't remember who it was or when it was. I think I remember that being a conversation.
I think you got an email asking you to call it an idle week and not a bye week. Same thing with walk-off. I've gotten some comments before asking me not to say walk-off, like a walk-off field goal when we wrote about Harrison Mevis. I'm not on that boat. There's a couple of things that push me the wrong way. Official, you've been doing that. I think you do that on purpose to make me mad. But that's going to do it for the latest episode of the MizzouToday Show. Hope everyone enjoyed an early one, a Tuesday one. And we should be back on a regular schedule Wednesday next week just because we had signing day for the late signees on February 4th on Wednesday. But you can follow Kyle on X. He'll have coverage of Saturday's game remotely, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So Kyle _McAreavy. Follow all of his work and all of his updates on Missouri men's basketball at MizzouToday.com. And we will see you guys next week.